I came here because my friends, these people with whom I have traveled, whom I would call companions, have urged for my aid in this matter in attempting to bring some unity of those whom we can recognize as being good people from around the Midland Sea to oppose the Lich King.
Urged for your aid, you sound reluctant then, Aranas.
In this, perhaps more so than in other matters, for I do not stand with the Archmage in this struggle, and I do believe that the Empire has acted towards your people unfairly, that an imbalance has existed, an imbalance that will naturally be changed, and so that balance can exist once more. As I visited here, however, a meeting with you personally became something of an interest to me after I spoke with another who would seek your place.
Aelor.
Ernest nods. He speaks of much and promises much. If I were but to not interfere, though that gives me the idea that there might be some way in which he fears my interference. I would be no match for him in a battle. My opinion matters little here. I am a foreigner, and this is your druidic council. I am curious as to your side of this tale. What you might tell me of him, if this danger to your position is true.
So, the several of you have come here in part to escort one of Pertinax's lapdogs, then to, along with him, acquire the druid's support in not fighting civilization, and throwing back the Lord of Dead and the dragons as well. And in part for doing so, you would like to know my thoughts and feelings, Aranas. Do I have that right?
Well, I'd say, and of course, if there's anything that I might be able to do to aid you, so that you might want to aid us.
Aelor is a fool. He lacks vision. He is power hungry and sees this position I hold is something natural for him, as if it were mandated by the gods. Clearly it was not, otherwise he would have taken the title back when I did, decades ago. Aelor has no plan. Aelor says that he'll organize the druids and have them running like civilization almost, concerted and united, even though I already have achieved just that. Tell me, when you spoke with Aelor, did he have any idea of how he was going to aid the Empire by defeating the Lord of Dead? Any plan?
He did not speak with me for long enough to reveal if he had one or not. He insinuated as much, but I can only guess as to what that might be.
He has chosen to spend his time manipulating. I imagine he learned that at the knee of the blue. His words aren't as venomous as those of any dragon. She takes a momentary glance to Aranas' hip before looking back at his face.
His hand sort of automatically moves to it without really him knowing. To grasp the hilt of the blade, as he so often does when unconsciously when.
Aelor did the same thing, looking to the dagger and back. Well, the tooth, rather.
Dagger, huh?
I know, dagger. Right. The sneer deepens. Now, whereas Aelor has no vision, no purpose, and is most assuredly still tied to the blue, I, as a matter of fact, do have plans and designs. In part, I'm waiting. I can make this conclave go for months, maybe even another year or two.
And may I ask what it is that you seek in waiting? What it is that you hope to gain?
The Lord of Dead is handling what I myself would have handled were it not for his interference. Retribution against the Empire saves me the trouble, really. I see no reason to act. Not immediately. If the Lord of Dead is going to do what I would have done myself, albeit in a different fashion, and while I certainly have no love for the Lord of Dead, I do think back on the spirits I have befriended in my lifetime, and the lifetimes of every High Druid before me, and how they have been broken and crushed under ages of emperors and archmages who thought they knew better.
Aranas nods, because he, well, somewhat agrees that the sort of, like slavery of elementals and all kinds of constructs and such is not really a good thing.
What do the rest of you do?
Well, Aurelia kind of cocks her head, then from the back kind of speaks up, says, even assuming that the druids themselves, that you yourself could, by yourself, without assistance, defeat or at least stop the Lich King and the Frey once the Empire is destroyed, and he will undoubtedly continue whatever unnatural scheme he is currently hatching. You would leave him the satisfaction of finally accomplishing what you wanted to do all this time?
I have no particular pride in how civilization is reduced to huddled masses. I only want it done, and it spares nature the blood and resources if it is done by someone else's hand, before that hand is severed as well.
It would spare the resources in the fight against the Empire, because there would be no fight between the Druids and the Empire, yes. But you would still have to oppose the Lich King.
I would still have to oppose the Empire. I can handle the Lord of Dead, the One-Eyed King, better than the Empire can.
You can at his current state, however. If he succeeds in his plans, he would be far more powerful than he is now.
He would need time to consolidate, Paladin, which I would not afford him. The linchpin of this unnatural cold revolves around the revival of the White, something that has been heralded for time before the bones were brought out of Moonrack. Something that I realize that you discovered yourself. Now, I do have a plan to stop the White, and with the White done, this unnatural cold will end, thus giving nature all the time it needs to overwhelm the undead, as it has in the past.
As it has in the past, but not alone.
Not alone. Nature is not alone, Paladin.
Looks confused.
She looks condescending.
Yeah, of course she does.
Aranas will look to the druid again and say, I have a question of a slightly different matter, perhaps something that I might have more of an interest in than my companions. It seems that there has been some It says, Francis, dispute of ideology among the druidic peoples, being that Aelor, as I have been told, has worked with unnatural beings, such as those known as intellect devourers, and that he has been enabled to channel the power of the Iron Sea.
She
Something
scowls.
that I believe was not something that druids had done ever before.
She scowls heavily. Yes, Aelor's threat, and perhaps his charm, is that he is able to control the rage that swirls around the Iron Sea. Druids, dear nephew, typically have problems with two regions. Well, there's several, but in regards to the body of waters, the fangless thing of the Midland Sea, for it being neutered, and the Iron Sea, for what the Wizard King did to it ever so long ago. Aelor's ability to shunt power away from that to fuel the blue says much about his prowess and his predilections.
Is there nothing to be done about such a thing? For I was under the understanding that the druids had become united as one.
That is not true, as is the case with every society. There are matters of dissent. We are not a hive mind, nephew. Perhaps you would know something about dissent, spending so much time in your mother's court.
And it seems that you have made your position clear. One more question, however, is, well, why you have allowed for this meeting to occur. You said it yourself that you do not usually allow for such a thing, and I imagine that you have many things to consider and much to do with your time.
In part, I did state my curiosity, mostly curious. However, there is part of me which does concede that I may be wrong, in that when it's all said and done, and the Empire is nothing more than cows and sheep fleeing from masses of undead, that nature will not be able to pick up the pieces, that nature will not be able to rule this land as it once did. And so I have decided to listen to you. I even tolerate the cow being here. There is a disparaging look again at Jasmine before returning to Aranas.
Jasmine gives an odd smile in return.
You'll continue. Well then, perhaps I should make an argument for why I believe that the druids in this would be better served with aiding the Empire as it is. Nature, right now, is cooed mostly by the unnatural cold, as I believe we all know. So looks to his companions. But it is also under threat by the hungry masses of people who only grow more desperate. The desperation that I've seen traveling the land, close to and further away, both from this forest, has shown me one thing, and that is that the people of this empire has lost faith in it. They are looking for a new place where they can live a new way, since their old one has failed. Should the High Druid, the Druids in general, be able to provide such a way, a new way of life, for the many who seek it, should they prove themselves to be the better philosophy compared to the Empire, the one that succeeded, the one that saved the remains of what the Empire could be, the one that offered shelter, that offered a way to continue living for the many starving and begging for food in the streets. I believe that not only would the Druidic powers stand stronger than ever, more numerous than ever, but also manage to reach much further than they have ever done before. War is, as I understand it, an unnatural thing. I know
She
of no beast.
scowls and looks towards Jasmine. You clearly can't agree with what he's saying.
I was giving him the chance to speak, but I'm sure you'd love to hear the word of the cow as well. She says, with unusual dignity, well, I do not know if all have lost faith in the Empire, but there is one thing I will say. I can see that perhaps the Empire has, in all of its time, perhaps done too much against Druids. I concede this. She opens her arms up. Yet, I do not think this is how it has to be. For neither wants bloodshed, neither wants losses. And the only true enemy who I believe there is the Lich King of Free. Therefore, at least myself, I am on the side to advocate some aid in restoring the Druids.
She, for the first time, her lips curl wide in the smile, perhaps, of a predator about to pounce on something. It is a feral look. Her eyes then flit over to Tempus. You, metal man, want to walk arm in arm alongside nature?
Tempest looks deep in thought for a while, closes his eyes and opens them. Genuinely never really thought of it. Pardon the curt term, I'm never really one to talk up to people. The last person I talk up to tried to throw me across a gauntlet, so no disrespect meant, just the way I am. If you're willing to help and save things, make sure that you're going to make a difference and not slaughter my friends or have a mass genocide against people that ultimately are going to try and do good. And Tempest rubs his head here. I'm not one for much in the way of diplomacy here. I'm a thief. I'm a buccaneer swashbuckling thief. I mean, it's a miracle I've not stole the flower from your dress over there. That's only why I'm standing back here.
Without, looking down, she says, there is no flower. Those are butterflies, metal man.
I'm not good with nature. Tempest just can't help but laugh.
She chuckles a bit too, though it might be the patronizing, poor metal man, accompanied with a head pat and then rub your belly. She then her eyes cut down to the Paladin. Well then surely, you, unless you plan on going back to a monastery after this is all done, not your problem. What do you care about? You're muted, Goger.
I care about all of the innocent lives that will be lost in case this conflict is allowed to start. That
Innocent. What is innocent?
Well, it is a person who has not contributed to any harm to towards others, I would say. Of course, there are some that would die, but there are more of them that has not.
Innocence is not a concept that fits in well with the forest. The rabbit perhaps does not cause harm except to the plants it eats, and yet it is devoured all the same. Trees, what harm do they cause? And yet they are chopped down to fuel fires, to fuel civilization, to fuel the halves of weapons. Where does innocence begin and end, Paladin?
I do not understand the suffering of trees as you do. What I see is people suffering, starving, desperate. And that is what I care about.
Her eyes look over towards Aurelia with a look of, you don't care that much, right?
In a sense, I couldn't care less about the Empire. All I would want is a world that remains worth living in, which I do not believe will remain the case should the Lich King and the Free not be opposed. You cannot expect them to do your dirty work and then just fall over once you decide to finally do something. They might need time to consolidate their power, but they already have plenty of that.
The High Druid grunts, looks over towards Aurelia, thick lips opening as if to ask something. Then a guilty look crosses her face, and the High Druid immediately whips back to look at Aranas. You were saying, nephew?
So looks to the others in there. Rather non-committal answers. In a way. Still continue to say, as I was saying, I believe the time is ready. The people are desperate, and they're looking for a new way in which they can live. A new philosophy which they can follow. They simply have never had a chance to try anything but the civilization they have grown up in. Say, they have been domesticated, and perhaps it is time that they are allowed to roam free. Would we, when a city, say, is liberated, slaughter all the domesticated beasts, or would we allow them a chance to at least feel the grass beneath their feet? I believe such would be for a greater purpose. In a way, I suppose I believe that these powers surrounding the toothless sea could work as a pack of wolves. There will be disputes among them, yes. One will stand stronger than the others, and for a time, that has been the Empire. That might not be so any longer, but just as wolves can duel by baring their fangs until one realizes that the other is stronger, so too can we. And when a greater threat arrives, we can all band together and fight like a pack. He sort of moves his hand to his symbol, unified in the moment of greater threat, only to fall into a stable order, a consensus at the end of it. I believe the Empire is desperate enough to accept such a consensus, one that might to them, to civilization, seem unfavorable, but one that they will feel the need to follow. The leaders might oppose it, but they cannot decide for the many desperate people who will go here, who already flee into this forest, for the aid and sanctuary that it might provide them, for a new way of life that does not revolve around working to repair roads or build houses. They will be happy as long as they have a way to sustain themselves. And if you take away the people of the Empire, you break the defenses. A king with no one to rule is no king.
The High Druid rolls her eyes and, perhaps in a conspiratorial fashion, looks towards Jasmine with a, "You can't believe he said that, right?"
Jasmine curls her lips slightly. While I do not feel that the full degree is what is said, yet it is. The Emperor is losing his power, and I cannot deny this. As much I do believe the Empire holds some value. It holds a place. It should not be just shunted completely to the side. I cannot deny this. She opens her arms up wide, bearing. She's not being aggressive. But at the same time, I'm willing to acknowledge and support the idea, at least, that allowing for nature's grip to take somewhat more of a hold, and for our position to lessen somewhat.
Dark, I want you to make a normal save for me.
Sure.
Okay. The feathered crown reels in anger and begins spewing like vitriol about how the Empire will never kneel to nature. And it takes the royal we stance as is conveyed in the quirk and begins like pounding into Jasmine's head. You are able to hold to what you just said without immediately countering it.
Okay.
That would have been so fun.
We'll look to Jasmine, actually, addressing her at this point.
The silken feathers do have a noticeable glow about them, though, as the artifact basically just begins to rampage in rage in Jasmine's mind.
As he will say, I'm glad for the support you're giving me, Jasmine Rose. And I know that you've seen what I've seen. People flee to the Wildwood. People want this. And is it not a crime against the Empire to deny the Imperial people what they desire so much, if the alternative to them getting it is cold death, hungry in icy streets?
She frowns slightly, possibly the headache she is now getting.
Oh, it is pissed.
Putting a slight hand on Aranas' shoulder. It is not fair for the people, for them to be subjected to all that's happening. And though I do not believe that it is the Empire's fault, I could see that some were able to take refuge in the Druidic power. Though, in all said, and I cannot deny, the Empire will for always hold my loyalty, even if I admit that we are not as strong as we've always been.
You saw Newport. You saw the people held outside by iron gates. They are just looking for a life. The Empire is not taking care of all the people it has promised to protect, and as such a new stability must be found. The High Druid sort of nods to her bow slightly. The Druidic powers, their ideology works. We can see that around us. They have the powers needed to save these people, to take them under their wings, so to speak, to teach them a way of life where they might be able to struggle, perhaps, to live a more natural existence. Some would not want this, but those would not go to join the High Druid. Those would flee to the capitals of the Empire, where they would stay, and continue their life at the edges of the sea, where the cities are. It says, let them have the choice. And I believe that the result will be clear. He looks to the High Druid. Especially if the Druidic powers are the ones to save the Empire, or what remains of it, from both fire and ice, death and starvation. There will be no question as to who is the greater power.
Jasmine frowns slightly at all this.
You have seen it, just as I have.
I have seen it, yes, but the disillusion of one thing does not necessarily bring about all stability. Not all will come over. Yet I do not feel this is.
The high druid, having lost her basically like her conspiratorial partner, her partner in crime, looks over towards a Geráck with basically like a "Can you believe these two?" expression.
That's Geráck just pause, just the sigh.
Just like keeps combing like, "Oh, I fucking can."
Oh, there's
It's
fucking.
I'm imagining
Geráck doesn't
Geráck's
really
gauntlet is just
Geráck
a
doesn't
fist
really
of
look
yellow.
that surprised because he knows that this was Aranas' opinion all along. He does look a bit surprised at Jasmine though, because he thought that she would defend the Empire a bit more, but he doesn't have anything to add at the moment though.
The high druid then like looks for a few seconds at Geráck. Doesn't really get like anything from his face. Looks over towards Tempus with a "Can you believe these three?"
Tempest nods.
I can.
The high druid nods back, an affirmation, then looks back to Aranas and Jasmine.